I will talk about like where do I come from, why do my works look like, feel like, are like they are, what they are, and since I'm always collaborating with and working together with musicians, I called it sonic landscapes and visual resonances in order to make clear that the combination of sound and image are very important for me, for my work, for my life also. And together they build a landscape, they resonate, these emanations of hearing and of seeing and of feeling are very, very dear and very important for me. Jim O'Rourke, maybe you know him. He's a musician who has a very elaborate body of work. Why am I writing this here? Because I think that's why I'm asking myself also, like, what is it that I'm doing? How will this end? Will it end? Will this working on music videos and abstract compositions for together with music and sounds, will this ever end? I don't think so. I hope that I will be making works when I'm 98, like Louise Bourgeois. So where do I come from? I was trained as a graphic designer in the 1990s, and I never learned how to make animation or anything. So I'm a total autodidact in regards to moving images. I wouldn't even be able to make the trailer of Punto Iraya because I really don't know how you do that. Everything I do, I just tried it out and I learned by myself. So nobody ever showed me any software. Nobody ever taught me anything how to do it. It's really like, and this is maybe for the students, go and find your own path, your own way of doing things, because it's you choose the tools. You choose the way how you work with the tools, you choose the combinations of everything, and that's what makes you and your work special, because then you know what you're doing. And every tool I'm using and everything I'm working with is, I feel like an instrument, like a musical instrument. You know, I really started my business very early. Yeah, I was only 23 when I said like, okay, I don't need to work for anybody else. I can do this on my own. So together with friends, I looked for a place where we can work in, and we started at the same time. I started my graphic design business. They started their own label, which was called Mego. And from that moment on, it became a meeting space. Everybody came by. We sat together. We listened to music. We called, la la la. It was a very collaborative spirit these days of being together, of working together. And as I was a graphic designer, I was responsible for everything that the label represented visually, like the logo and the covers and everything else, etc. But sooner or later, the musicians, because they were all electronic musicians, they started playing music on the stage. And in the 90s, when electronic musicians started to make live events, they were sitting on the stage with a laptop, and nothing was happening. Yeah, it looked like as if they were checking email. So you needed something else in order to make a compelling concert. So very early on, it was clear that we need some visuals. Yeah, we need to present something that gives the vibe of the music. And that's why I started to bring my record covers and images into another domain, the time-based domain. It was also the time when the very first browsers started and internet came to the world. This is Netscape in 1995, and next to starting up a company of graphic design and an electronic music label, we also started a company that made websites. So we were also one of the very first Austrian web design developers and programmers. Yeah, that was a time. The next days, next years from 95 till, I don't know, 2001 or 2 were really like, there was so many things going on. We were going to Japan, we were making appearances, we were going to Ars Electronica, la la la, lots of things and installations, etc. It was really a very, very interesting time for me. The collaboration with people and this understanding how musicians are working was very important for me. When making a record cover or when creating a music video for the artist, I was always sitting down with the artist and asking them like, so how did you go about it? How did you make your music? What was the inspiration? And then I started to transform the way the musicians were working, and finding ways of doing this on a visual level, to also find procedures and processes in how I could work with graphic design. Because music is a time-based domain. That means you're doing something, you're playing an instrument, and immediately you are hearing what is coming out of the instrument. With animation, especially when you're working with something like, let's say, After Effects, or really like tiny, minute details in drawing single frames and then bringing them to movement, that is quite a time-consuming and tedious process. You, at the very, very end, you see in real time what is happening. And this process, I was so annoyed with, you know. It was, I couldn't bear waiting to see what is happening and what is coming out. So I wanted to have this immediacy that music has, as in, you're plugging a string and you hear it, you're playing a flute and you hear it, you are doing something and you hear it. And trying to find processes that would enable me to see in real time on the screen or on the beamer or somewhere else what I'm doing. That was my main goal. Today I'm really like working together with lots of different musicians, creating live performances, and I'm also making data visualizations together with scientists and programmers. So let's start with some examples. First, I want to tell you about life. What is life? Life is everything you say, you sing, you paint, you write, you produce, happens in this very moment, life. And it's there for everybody to experience. When you're doing this not in your small little room, but on the stage, everybody can watch you and can see and can experience what is happening live. That can be quite frightening, because you ask yourselves, what will I do? What shall I say? Will I maybe make a fool out of myself? But it's also engaging. Whatever I'm saying now to you, I cannot take back. There is no undoing function in here. So this special attention that I give to this live moment, or that you also give me by listening to me, thank you very much, it's really creating a very intense and special moment. And in this live situation, things happen that would not happen otherwise. I don't know why. It's this very special situation that we are in that initiates very special outcomes. This record cover that I made for Peter Rehberg, it was his first solo album, and the record was called 7 Tons for Free. And it was one of the very first electronic music albums which were made out of pure digital sounds, like really zeros and ones. You could hear them. And at that time, only another artist, Ryoji Ikeda from Japan, had been brought out another record that was really super digital. And then Peter came out with his record, which was also super digital, but then it had this cover, like earthy tones, warm, obviously not so digital things. And then everybody asked me, like, why would you make this cover? This actually is from the surroundings of our studio. We were on the outskirts of Vienna. There were car makers and wastelands, but there was also a very special community building housing area that was established in the 1970s and had a very distinctive shape. And I went there with my car, and then I took just photos from the area whilst they were floating in water. So this is Alt-Erla, for those who might know. These are very, very rare shadows of Alt-Erla and the surroundings. But nevertheless, then I thought, like, okay, so if people are really wanting to see the digitality of the music, then why not give them what they are expecting? And this is my very first video that I ever made. It is called EEE, because that is the track title from Peter. And we just took the sounds and opened them in Photoshop. Then these data is being interpreted as raw data, and it is then being converted into a black and white image. And then we just took these images and made a video out of it. The whole song is just 1 minute, exactly 1 minute. The first half minute I tried to cut according to the sound, and then I was bored and took the piece that I had, flipped it time-wise, and had the second half of the minute, and then that was it. Other parts from that time is covers are produced for Christian Fennes, for instance, called Hotel Parallel. And there was also a very nice video, which I will skip because it's nice, but I want to show you more the newer works. I have this piece here because it was made in Portugal. So I have several references in this masterclass to Portugal. This is from a live appearance in Braga. Is that the right name for the town? It's north from Porto. And it was by a concert of Gerhard Puttusnik and Ramon Bauer. At that time already, I had the possibility of working with a software that gave me the possibility of working really live, as in no longer cutting things together and crafting on a timeline, but setting up a system to let play. I like the quality also. Of course it's bad, yeah? I mean, it was made with PAL. It's 720 by 576 pixels, which is nothing. And then also in the live situation, we had a quarter PAL of stuff. And we had a frame rate of some, I don't know, maybe 12, 15 frames per second, something like that, depending on how good your computer was. But as you can see, it's not about how good and how technically perfect your equipment is. It's rather about what you do with it, and if you have fun, and if this moment happens when life really starts to create something. So as you can see, it was around the years 2000, and live VJing at the time used to look always the same. People were collaging stuff. They were using materials like driving by some houses and filming black and white stripes or something like that. And the frame rates were low and quality was low. And then another software came up which at that moment made it possible to generate stuff. NATO 242 it was called. But it was quite hard to learn. So I rather used it in order to create just still images. And out of these still images then, I created another record cover, which was Triste for Oren Ambarchi, who is also an improvisational electronic musician. These so-called underwater sea creatures that I built here were made just out of still images from live experimentations, let's call them like that. And then these together, when you put them together, you can create dark water creatures that are only glowing under the sea. I was quite fed up with the possibilities of playing live and not having enough quality that I wanted, not being able to program in a hardcore whatever way. So I started to use other means. My daughter had been born in 2000, so she was at that time some 2.5 years old. And there was this kids drawing software called KidsPix. And it was really fun because you would paint something and it would make sounds, you would have stamps and you would have rubbers and you would have all sorts of brushes, and it was really like fun to work with it. And I had this little kid sitting on my lap painting, and she was capable of watching me like 25 minutes, which is for a little kid like that, like I thought like, wow, okay, so I mean, if I can do this with her, I can do this with the audience also. So I started playing live with KidPix, just painting, live painting basically. Use the software, the program, as an environment for playing live. I made the sounds, and the musicians were taking up the sounds and then making it into a whole environment and into a whole concert. And if I didn't paint anything, nothing would happen. There's this moment which comes very quickly, that you do not know what else, what can I do now? So, but you have to go on, because if you're not doing, nothing's happening. There's no concert, and that is also quite an interesting approach. Performing images. This comes, of course, from Isobel Harbison, who wrote this book, Performing Image. She's an art historian, critic, and lecturer at the Department of Art in Goldsmiths in London. And she writes that artists have been combining moving image and performance for decades, I mean, since at least the 1960s. She's interested in the relationship towards images and how images have the capacity to produce emotion, a sense of proximity, as in a feeling of being closer, an intensified sense of presence or a sense of total alienation. Of course, she's referring to images that we see and that we look at in all these social medias and all the mediated images that we're confronted with all day long. And but as I call myself an image maker, I have to be aware that the images that I produce also are a part of this whole world of mediated images that we're confronted with. So this idea of the images that we produce are producing us as a society, and the world that we are creating through our images is having an effect on us. I think this reciprocity of giving and taking, being and becoming, etc., is very important to me. So the images that we produce are performing also for ourselves and are doing things. When I was collaborating with musicians, I was kind of envying them in the sense of they have the power of just making something that you can listen to, and it can be, most of the times it doesn't need to have all the big explanations that art needs or is supposed to need. Music can be beautiful. It creates this deep sense of emotion in us. And I thought, like, I would love to do something like that, that is in a way also creating these deep emotions in us, but not something to listen to, because that's not my domain, but something to look at. And that's why the words of Isobel Harbison is resonating with me, because me wanting you to give images that you can fall into, that you can stay with, that are with you, I have to be aware that they are creating something with you. So, in 2005 then, I made this movie called Chronomops, which also has a connection to Portugal, because it was commissioned by the Portuguese label Chronica. At that time, they were making a sampler saying, like, do you have 2 minutes of your time? Because they were celebrating radio. And they invited us and a range of musicians to create a theme of 2 minutes dedicated to the radio. So me and General Magic, we made this little track that is also celebrating 2 minutes of your time. Okay, so this is basically my past. Let's call it like that. Now let's talk about this very strange terminus called post-digital. I mean, I know it's old already, some 10 years or 12 years or so, and nobody really can exactly say what it means. Let's quickly look at the difference between analog and digital. Analog is continuum. If something is flowing, like this sine wave that we're seeing here, if this was a vibration, we could listen to it. It is a continuum of going up and down. It cannot be divided. But the digital, for instance, is dividing this continuous flow into bits, into parts that are distinctly shaped, as in it's 1, and then it's 2, and then it's 3, and then it's 4, or it's something like that. And you can go very small in the details so that it nearly feels as if it was continuously, but it never is, because it's digital. Let's first look at digital. I mean, this was made digitally. So this is a gradient that you can easily create in your Photoshop, etc. The problem with the digital stuff is it's always super clean, like bam, yeah, gradient. Have you ever tried to make this with hands? Wow, that's quite hard. So it's super clean, people say it's losing authenticity or realness or something. It's missing the human touch. So Holger Lund, who is a theoretician writing together with Cornelia Lund, he wrote this article about media strategies in a post-digital world. And he says, like, how do we cope with the digital? We really return to analog means, which is happening a lot. I mean, my students who are digital natives, they so love to work with their hands, with analog ways of creating images, etc. So this is one way. We can go back to real old analog means and create images and create stuff with it. Or we can have simulations of what the analog looks like. I mean, you know, like Instagram filters, yeah? That's exactly what we have. There's a lot of that. There's all sorts of hybrid strategies, like using real material, digitizing it and doing things with it, or creating something digitally, but then putting it out into the world with analog means. And then there's hyperdigitization, all the these 3D incredible worlds that are super digital, super vivid colors, etc. As this article is from 2015, now with artificial intelligence, okay, we can add on to post-digital media strategies, etc. Some 10 years ago, I started to work also with analog means. I got myself a little device that could take sounds and convert these sounds into analog video signals. So it was really a one-to-one conversion from sound into images. And the images you would create are simple black and white stripes. And I started to work with a musician, for instance, in this case with Ivan Pavlov. And one of the first works that we then created was called Cold Terrain. And it was made as a vertical video, not a vertical film, because we created it with analog means, but of course we recorded it digitally, but then it was again printed to film. So this work only exists basically as a celluloid for the vertical cinema series that could only be seen being projected by a very special projector. It is a CinemaScope projector that has been rebuilt to a vertical view. So this was my setup back then. I had this electronics device that could create sine waves, sawtooths, sine waves, triangles in all sorts of frequencies, but also because it's a lab device that is being used to test material, it could also create sine waves that are not listenable for our ears, but are being shown through my device. So what you see here, like these stripes, these are the frequencies. You've seen the sine wave before. It was going like this, yeah? Up and down, up and down, up and down. So when it's up, it's creating, for instance, this line. When it's down, it's creating the other line. So black and white, and if it's a sine wave, it's going like this, like a ramp down and up again. So you have this very soft down, up, down, up. If it was a pure square tooth, like nothing, nothing, we would see distinct blocks of black, white. And then there's this moment, which we cannot hear, but we can produce these frequencies, when suddenly the horizontal waves are going vertical. Woo! And now you can make very crazy and interesting stuff. I will just show you one or two small snippets from a concert that Florian Heck and me did in, as you can see, 2015. And again, a reference to Portugal, because this was played in Madeira, at the Madeira DIC. Here you can see how I was playing with these minimal device and possibilities. This is a video that was not created with analog means. First I made a record cover for Peter Rehberg's album. I used a photography from some plants that I made at Madeira DIC in the night. And then through some means, these images really became very crystallized. And then I was looking for ways to create this crystallization method again in the moving image form. And this is what came out of it. And then something happened as I was rendering the movies, but then putting them on top of each other. suddenly some very interesting effect happened that the colors were shaking, so to speak, and that perfectly fit to the sounds of Peter's music. So as you can see, I'm not interested in making beautiful images. I like that when you see the materiality of this mediated or digital created stuff. Yes. So then came Corona. And for me, the time of Corona was a very productive time. And since then, I've been working really a lot and creating lots of stuff. Because what happened was we all went into lockdown, and then some friends of mine said, like, okay, let's meet every Sunday, every second Sunday, and just jam together. Like, let's make jam sessions. Use Zoom, and let's do stuff. So we really set out to meet every second Sunday in the afternoon, play together. Everybody was like putting stuff in there, etc. I really liked that time, to be honest. I enjoyed it a lot.
That is weird. How annoying. What are you hearing now? I can hear now voice, yes, voice. And beat. I can hear the beat. Yeah, beat as well. Beat.
But what happened is really, I made a lot of friends during that time. I met a lot of great people online through these jam sessions. And for instance, Mari Bastaszewski, she wrote some manifesto about that time, the Stardust Manifesto. And then she invited Jen, her friend, to make the music. So we created this collaborative piece, though, which also is a sign of the Corona times. Frozen Jumper, which is also a music by Peter Rehberg, and happened to be produced in the times of Corona, with analog means, with a video synthesizer and a little device called Videoart, which is really nice. Okay, thank you very much, and I'm happy if you have questions or anything or something like that.